Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great weekend. I'm just here to show you some of the books that I've read the past week. And spoiler, I have read a lot of Poe again, and I've started another book. But I'm just going to talk a bit about Poe. So I finished this a couple of weeks ago, and I've already done a brief video on this. It's called Poe, A Life Cut Short by Peter Ackroyd, and this is a very slim biography on Edgar Allan Poe. I wanted to read this just to inform me about some of the short stories and poems that I've been reading by Poe. And as they say, context is everything, and it's certainly the case with Poe. I mean, it's no surprise that a lot of his short stories are most likely inspired by events directly within his sphere of, influence. So, no less than three or four of his close family members died of consumption or tuberculosis, people that meant very much to him. And if you know anything about Poe, he had a very difficult time keeping friends. So these deaths would have had a profound impact on him. So from his mother to his wife, some other close friends, I think his brother or cousin, don't quote me on that. But in any case, I believe the Mask of the Red Death, and I think the Telltale Heart, again, don't quote me on that. I should know because I just read this. They were written around the time that his wife first started showing signs of consumption. So this would have been a very deep, dark time for him. And it's, just unfortunate that these great works were inspired by events that caused him so much pain. But going back to the biography, this was very informative despite how slim it was. I was expecting a bit more analysis on Poe's literary styles and themes, but it was mainly focused on his life events, which I didn't mind. I do like a good biography. And the way Ackroyd describes Poe is he was a very tortured individual from the moment that his mother died of consumption, and he was taken into the Allan family's home, but never really formally recognized as an adopted son. And he had a very strained relationship with his adopted father. As Poe reaches adolescence and goes to college, we start to see other aspects of his personality that aren't as, they're not necessarily the best traits. But, he was a young man. He gambled a lot, and he consistently asked his adopted father for money. And this really upset his adopted father, who eventually cut ties off with Poe. Poe, as we find in this biography, had a talent for alienating people. And I think maybe this might have been a defense mechanism from him. He's been abandoned by people throughout his young life. His mother, who didn't obviously mean to abandon him, but had died. And then, of course, the strained relationship with his adopted father, and the woman who even took him in, Mrs. Allan, who did adore Poe, had died young of consumption, I believe. So, anyways, a lot of tragedy that Poe experienced. And unfortunately, at the time that he was writing, there wasn't a lot of market for American writers at the time. There was a lot of popularity for English writers and having those works republished, but not necessarily for original works. So he really struggled, and he also struggled to find work. And Ackroyd seems to say that while Poe was a heavy drinker, he wasn't necessarily an alcoholic, and says there's a difference. I'm not going to pass comment on that, but it is very apparent that Poe would go into these binge, have these moments of binge drinking for days on end, and it would cost him his jobs. So you can only imagine, his aunt, who was always by his side and one of his biggest supporters, and his wife, who was also his first cousin, had a lot to struggle with because he was the breadwinner. But anyways, so a lot of tragedy and heartache for Poe, whether it be, bad luck or his own fault through his own personality. But nevertheless, a great writer. Again, it's just unfortunate that a lot of the works that we find are directly taken from events in his life. And indeed, some of the short stories that I've read seem to be Poe almost projecting himself into some of the characters. And this is very apparent in William Wilson, which is a great short story in which the protagonist, if you will, seems to be tormented by a doppelganger. And it's very reminiscent of Poe's years while he was studying in England, had a gambling problem. And it seemed that he, through this doppelganger, he was trying to suppress his own better angel by committing certain vices. But anyways, it's a great short story. Some of the other short stories that I really enjoyed reading that I haven't read in a really long time are The Fall of the House of Usher. This year was the first time I read The Gold Bug. I enjoyed that. Message in a Bottle, The Pit and the Pendulum. And then I really enjoyed his poems. He's an excellent poet. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, I'm sure, but Ulalume, The Bells, Annabelle Lee. Magnificent writing. But anyways, that's all I have to say on Poe. I thoroughly enjoyed reading his short stories this month. So, what I started reading yesterday, actually, and what I haven't been able to put down, is Susanna Gregory's A Plague on Both Your Houses. I had never heard of this before, and before this year, I haven't really read a lot of fiction, or I did about 10 years ago and stopped. I tend to read a lot of nonfiction now. But I saw this in the local Waterstones, and I really enjoy medieval history. And this is a murder mystery that takes place during the Black Death when it first reaches Cambridge. It's dark academia, which I also enjoy. I'm thoroughly enjoying this murder mystery that takes place in the medieval era. Apparently it's the first in a series of 3. I don't tend to like series. I find that the first is always the best, but having, nearly more than halfway through this, after having started last night, I have a feeling I'll be picking up the others. So yes, that's what I have been reading this week, and just a recap of what I've been doing this month. I'm looking forward to Nonfiction November. I think I've got some books that might fill the prompts this year. I can only remember 2 off the top of my head, Record and Boundaries, but I'll be doing a separate video on that. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on these books. Have you read any Poe? What have you been reading this month? What are you up to this week? And, happy Halloween. See you next time. Bye.